welcome to the first of our annual legislative breakfasts for the Lamoille Chamber of Commerce. Thank yous first to Josh Smith, who I don't see at the time, CEO here at Green Mountain Support Services, for hosting this wonderful event. We can see it's a fantastic room, fantastic site. And congratulations to Green Mountain Support Services, which was recently recognized as one of the top companies in Vermont to work for. And they'll be going to the recognition in a couple of months to actually select the top of those categories. So thank you to them. Also, thank you as well to our chef extraordinaire, Deb from Deb's Place, chamber member, who provided all of the food and refreshments, and I believe that they also provided enough for Green Mountain Support Services to have for the full day as well. In the back room there, they couldn't put everything out that Josh had ordered from Green Mountain Support Services. As you know, we rely on the host sites to provide the food and refreshments, and thank you to Josh and Green Mountain Support Services for providing that for us today. And thank you for Deb, for Deb's Place. Deb indicated to me that we would be surprised, or shouldn't be surprised, at how many people have been referred to her just by being a chamber member. So I put that out there to all of you, if not for yourselves, then for other businesses and business people, others in the community that could benefit from being a part of the Lamoille Chamber of Commerce. In a minute, I'll be turning it over to our moderator, Jeff Lindemer. First, I just wanted to recognize upcoming events. Next month, in February, on Monday, February 25th, will be the next legislative breakfast, and it will be at Lamoille County Mental Health, which has hosted us in past years as well. The next night, Tuesday, February 26th, will be the annual meeting for the Lamoille Chamber of Commerce, and my understanding is that TJ Donovan will be our guest speaker for that event. It's a wonderful evening. There'll be a silent auction. There's an opportunity to hear about what's happening in the chamber and to be able to voice as far as your ideas and for moving forward. But exciting evening that we have planned. March, we do not have yet the site for legislative breakfast. It'll be the last Monday, I believe, of the month, and we're looking at Jeffersonville, Cambridge area, and we do have a couple of sites that we're looking at, and hope to nail that down. April, the legislative breakfast will be at Northern Vermont University, Johnson State College campus. We did have to postpone the Lamoille Valley Young Professionals speed interviewing event this past week due to weather, and that has been rescheduled for March 21st from 5 to 9 p.m. So if you'd like to be a part as a business, an employer that would like to be part of the interviewing opportunity for young professionals and others, give a call to the chamber, 888-7607. Anything else? Any other input? Hearing none, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, who has done this in past years, and we're very happy that he's providing this service for us again this year. Jeff Lindemer.
Thanks, Rich. I'm going to steal a little bit of his thunder. Josh Smith came in, so I'd like to have a special thanks to Josh Smith for this great location. He turns red.
We told them that you were one of the top businesses of the year.
That's right.
In Vermont already, and thank you for the refreshments as well.
Happy New Year. This is a perfect Vermont January morning, and when Rich was talking about March and April, I thought, wow, that would be nice. March and April. Okay, the format of the legislative breakfast, and as you can see, we're really picking up steam. This is really a great turnout. We really appreciate you for showing up. What we're going to do today, since this is the first legislative breakfast, is we're going to let each legislator spend 5 minutes explaining what he or she is doing, what committees they're on, what priorities they have, and introduce themselves. So I'm going to start at the far end with our dear Heidi Schurman, and we'll just move down. There are microphones here. I'd like to ask that you save your questions to the end. So please hold your questions, and when you do ask questions, please give your name, who you are, where you're from, and your question. So Heidi, please.
I don't know. Well, I'm not quite sure how that works. So my name is Heidi Sherman. I represent Stowe, and this is my 7th term. I won't need 5 minutes. I'll take 2. But as I said, I've been assigned to the Energy and Technology Committee in the House, which I'm certainly pleased about. That was created last year, or last biennium, by the Speaker, rightly in my view, because I think those issues are critical and weren't given the time and the attention needed under the committees of jurisdiction in the past. And so it's its own committee, really focusing on energy and technology issues. Avram's on the committee with me, as is Mark Higley. I suspect Avram might talk about it a little bit. My priority right now, and what I've been working on for the last 3 weeks, is Act 46 and the involuntary merger of Elmore Morristown Unified Union and Stowe School Districts. Both of our school boards are fighting that, and so we're trying to get a delay we're trying to get an extension of that July 1, 2019 deadline, so that for 2 purposes really. One is, obviously, we've got a legal case going on, as do other districts. We've got, in my view, I think ours is certainly, I'm familiar with ours much more so than the others, but ours is a very good case in my view and the view of many attorneys that I've spoken to. So we want to have that play out prior to us actually having to merge, because if we were to merge, it would be virtually impossible. If the plaintiffs were to win the case after July 1, it would be virtually impossible to unravel that merged district. And so we want to make sure that the case is given. In addition, as many of you from the Elmore Morristown district are aware, it takes some time to put together a merger that is good, that is well done, that's good for the kids, that's good for the community. We need to ensure our community understands what will happen under a merged district, how it will be worked out. And right now, if we were to merge, the voter experience would be horrendous. Right now, there's a warned meeting February 26th to vote on the Articles of Agreement, but then March 2nd or March 4th, or 5th, you're going to be voting on your own Elmore EMU school board members and your Stowe school board members, and then you're going to have to go back and vote for another board and back and vote for a budget. It's horrendous, and it's and again, as the Elmore community and the Morrisville community knows, you really need to ensure that your community and your parents and your teachers and taxpayers really understand what's going to happen. And so we want to make sure we do it well and do it right. If we're going to do it, we know we can. I think our leadership in both districts is sound and solid and good. We just want to make sure that that it's done right if it's going to happen. So that's where my focus has been. Other education issues as well, given that as you know, I've been fighting against the state control of education for many years, and that seems to be an uphill battle throughout all of those years. And with the governor or his administration coming out with the idea anyway for one single statewide school district, I've been working on another proposal to move forward on. So that's where my focus is right now. The timing is important for that merger extension, and we need to do it within the next couple of weeks in order for us to so that's where my focus is right now. So.
Thank you, Heidi. Ever?
Avram Pat, representing the Lamoille, Washington district, which is Morrisville and Elmore, and in Washington County, Woodbury and Worcester. As Heidi mentioned, I am also on the Energy and Technology Committee, which is a very big change for me from my previous term 2 sessions ago when I was on the Healthcare Committee. So I'm shifting gears considerably in terms of the amount of focus I give to what issues. In the House, we only serve on one committee, and so the first half or 2/3 of the session, an awful lot of time is spent, each of us in our own particular committee, focused very heavily on whatever the subject area is of that committee. I'm going to start, I'll get to energy and technology in a minute, but I want to mention a couple of other things. One, I am also a member of the ad hoc group of legislators, both House and Senate members, working on the forced merger, a co-sponsor of a number of bills. Our district has the unique distinction of having 4 towns in 3 separate school districts, each one of which is in a forced merger situation. So there's 3 forced mergers covering all of the towns in the district, each situation being really a completely different situation in terms of the history, the relationships among the communities, and all of the other issues. In the district that Worcester is in, the Washington Central District, I have generally been in support of the concept of a merger in that district, as has a majority of the school board in Worcester, but not the way this is happening, and not until there is more agreement among the 5 communities in the current supervisory union. And so even though most of the Worcester School Board members would ultimately favor a merger, they are in the lawsuit along with many other communities. I wanted to say also that the issue of health care remains personally a very, very significant issue for me. It started for me when I was a kid. My father was what used to be called a general practitioner, now called a primary care provider, but took care of multi-generational families, counseled them, and was the focus of their healthcare system, and I remain committed to working our way as far as we can in Vermont to making sure that everybody has access to decent health care. In terms of energy and technology, some of you know that I spent over 16 years as general manager of Washington Electric Co-op before retiring in 2013. Worked in other jobs and in other activities that were energy related. So the energy part of it is, in the first couple of weeks, we've been getting our 101 lessons. Everyone is coming in and explaining to us what the Public Utilities Commission does, what this utility does, what that utility does. what Velco, the statewide transmission company, does, all of that stuff. And I happen to sit right next to the witness chair, and it's all very familiar to me. I feel like I could sometimes kick some of the witnesses in the foot if I think they got it wrong. I haven't done that yet. On the technology side, technology in this case refers to all forms of telecommunications, starting with your landline, telephone, cell phone, broadband, cable, and technology also refers to the state's information systems, the system for coordinating healthcare records, the E911 system, things like that. Obviously, connectivity and broadband is a big issue across the whole state. In this area, at my home, where all we have no cell signal and have access. The best broadband we can get is consolidated DSL, which is not the best. And so that's an issue that I will, as we try to give incentives and occasional funding, state or federal funding to various companies to expand. A priority for me is to put some obligation on them to actually, in exchange for that, commit to serving significant parts of the unserved parts of Vermont. And I just finished by saying that comparison is often made to the electric co-ops and rural electrification many years ago. The problem is the same. How we're going about doing it is very different for a number of circumstances. But if you look at Washington Electric Co-op's territory on a map, it looks like the co-op serves a fairly large part of the state. Except if you look closely on the map, you see it doesn't serve Barre Montpelier, it doesn't serve Route 12, it doesn't serve Route 14. It serves on both sides of those roads, and so there's a very close correlation between those hills and who doesn't have cell service and who doesn't have decent broadband service. So it's very, very similar situation. How we're going about trying to solve that is different.
Thanks, Edward. Matt?
So I'm back on commerce again this biennium, my second biennium, and this year I know for a fact we're putting a lot of time and effort into workforce development initiatives. The administration was a little hesitant to speak with us prior to the budget coming out, but now that the budget has been presented, we have already started working with the Department of Labor to try to match up people with the jobs that are available and try to scale up people so they can get those kinds of jobs. And to kind of piggyback on what Avram was saying, we have in my committee is Commerce and Economic Development, and obviously broadband and access is going to be a giant piece of that. And there's a bit of an overlap with the committees there. So I've been spying on the committee already, if you guys haven't noticed, so I keep an eye on that and try to make sure that commerce and the energy technology are in alignment, and just make sure that we are moving in the same direction. I think that's important. Besides those two issues, I think I personally want to push for the business portal, which is was presented by Secretary of State last year. It's essentially a place, it's the same place you go to. All right, is that better? Can you hear me? Yeah. So the last year, the Secretary of State presented a little program where other states currently do it, and it's essentially a place where businesses can go to the Secretary of State's office, where you go to fill out your LLC forms, your corporation forms, all that kind of stuff, and you can apply for permits right on one screen. Fill out all your information. All the information shoots out to the pertinent departments, so you're not trying to figure out who to go talk to, where to go talk to. Make life a little easier for businesses. There's still work to be done. That being said, also Act 250. As you know, the report has come out, and it goes pretty far in some instances, and I'll just say that I do appreciate the governor in his budget address making the point that Act 250 was put in place at a time where Vermont was experiencing very rapid growth, and now we are not seeing that. So it may be time for us to look at Act 250 and try to figure out a more sensible way to move forward. That's all.
Thanks for that.
I didn't figure out how to work this before you took that back there. So I had to play with it. So in the Senate, we're on 2 committees, and my morning committee switched from transportation to health and welfare, which is, for me, more closely aligns with what my budgets have been and the work that I do in appropriations. For me, one of the biggest areas that I'm trying to concentrate on in health and welfare is mental health. We have a mental health system in this state now, partly because it's the mental health agencies are designated agencies, and partly because the problems in mental health are much harder to deal with. And I have spent time in appropriations dealing with the budgets there. We have a lot of issues in mental health that are going on. So mental health, childcare are the areas that in health and welfare I'm focusing on, but that translates right into my afternoon committee, which remains appropriations. We break the appropriations committee up, much as the House does, into areas of interest, and each member makes recommendations and usually gets followed by the rest of the committee members. So my areas are DCF, Dale, so a lot of the programs that deal with older Vermonters, the health department, and I kind of share mental health with the chairman, which is Jane Kitchell, from that. So it's all in those human services areas that I'm spending most of my time. Also, I think that of note, the Joint Fiscal Committee, which is the committee that oversees the state spending when the legislature's not in session, I got reappointed to that this week. And I would say I did introduce, with some other people, 2 of the bills in the Senate to support the idea of a moratorium on Act 46 for those communities that are being forced into mergers. So.
Thanks, Rich.
Good morning, I'm Dan Noyes. I represent Woolton, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere with Matt, and I'm on the Human Services Committee. We are basically a policy committee that looks at Department of Children and Families, Department of Aging and Independent Living, and also part of the Department of Health, the part that's not a FUSI's committee, but Human Healthcare. So for the first 2 weeks, as it's been, we're basically having all the commissioners and secretaries come in and talk to us about what they do, what they're measuring, what are their outcomes. And so it's kind of just a lot of overview of all the different parts of those parts of state government. So I was on this committee last year. One of the things that I'm really interested in working on is how we provide services to older Vermonters. And I started the Older Vermonters Caucus, which is a way to bring together legislators to talk about the issues. We meet every Thursday morning at 8 o'clock. And it's a different topic each week. We talk about different bills that legislators are proposing and issues that will be coming up, and then we have overviews. So the first week it was Commissioner Hutt, she came in and gave an overview of their department and what their priorities are for this coming session. And then the second week, we had a presentation on the Older Americans Act, which is where the federal funding comes in to the state of Vermont. So next week is the AAA, so basically how people access services. Each week it's a different topic. Anyone's welcome to come down there. It's really more oriented to helping legislators who are not on the Human Services Committee understand the issues that are affecting their constituents. So, but you're welcome to come down.
Thank you, Dan.
This one's on.
Guess it's working, yes. Hi, good morning. I'm Dave Iacoboni. I represent Morrisville, Elmore, Worcester, and Woodbury. I won't repeat the whole Act 46 details. It's a pleasure working with Heidi and Avram and others to do our best to fix this terrible problem. I'm going to focus quickly on some other issues that I'm working on that perhaps are outside of my committee but mean a lot to me. We know in Vermont that in just the next 10 years, the number of senior citizens, those over age 65, will increase by 50%. We also know darn well that just because you turn 65 doesn't mean you're over the hill. But the evidence might show that you do generate more healthcare expending, a lot of it, as time goes on. We have a demographic tsunami coming our way. We don't have a lot of time to prepare for it. In the 1990s, we passed in the House by a large margin a long-term care trust fund. Died in the Senate by a mere 3 votes. We need a new vision. We need some bold leadership, because in the face of, frankly, what will become a crisis, we could do something now to prepare for it. I'll be introducing legislation to reintroduce a long-term care trust fund modeled after Social Security, asking state government to bring to us a plan next year for us to consider up or down and all the pros and cons to that. But I try to anticipate what's going to be a significant problem, what can we do today? Because as it is now, we're dealing with just a myriad of different challenges. Rich mentioned mental health. Many use the word crisis to describe that system. Our child care system, the commissioner came in and said, it's a system in crisis. I'm working with others to introduce a bill to, frankly, will cost a lot of money, no doubt about it, but to recognize there's never a good time to be in poverty. But the very worst time is when you're a little child. And we're pushing families at a cost of some $12,000 a year. Even those at the upper end of making $90,000 a year are spending 30% of their incomes on child care. We have an access problem, we have an affordability problem, we have an adequacy problem in child care. 70% of all families are working. We need to do something about this. It won't all be done in 1 year, but we need to put it on the table. And finally, I'm trying to push on health care. I want to stay below my 5 minutes, but I'm trying to push the notion of Vermont engaging in a multi-state effort to see if, together with other states, we can make a bridge to some type of Medicare for all system. I use that word as a shortcut, Medicare for all. There's plenty of difficulty, plenty of nuances to that. But there's an old saying, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. Premiums today are suffocating people. A modest plan with high co-pays and deductibles is $1,000 a month for a family. And that's with co-pays and the deductibles, and at the rate it's going, it will double in the next 10 years. We've got a lot of problems before us. I don't mean to sound like doom and gloom, but I'm excited about bringing whatever energy we can to at least have a robust discussion about some of these. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. I'm Lucy Rogers. I represent Cambridge and Waterville in the Vermont House, and I was appointed to the Healthcare Committee. So along with Dave and Dan and Rich, I deal with the issues relating to healthcare, mental health, and then there's a little bit of overlap between Human Services and Healthcare Committee, but Dan's committee tends to take more of the opioid and addiction issues, and we take healthcare, mental health. We oversee the Green Mountain Care Board, which is the regulatory agency for healthcare in Vermont. And then we've been hearing so far from the Green Mountain Care Board, Vermont Health Connect, and an update on the exchange. And then we deal with the Department of Vermont Health Access, which deals with Medicaid in the state. And some of the conversations we've had on the committee, one thing we run into quite a bit is just looking at our role as a state government in a system which is partly federal and partly state. So there's certain issues that we're really restricted in what we can do in the state of Vermont because of federal regulation or federal funding, and then just responding to changes on the federal level to make sure that the experience of Vermonters is as consistent as possible. And my interest within healthcare, affordability is huge, and we talk quite a bit about affordability in the committee. And then the other piece that's important to me personally is healthcare access and making sure that we're holding that need just as high as affordability. Because even if your health insurance is as affordable as it possibly can be, if you have to travel so far to see a doctor or to receive the care you're used to receiving, that becomes a barrier to care. It's just as bad as if the cost of health insurance was a barrier in the first place. And then, I won't take too much time, but in addition to healthcare, I joined the Rural Economic Development Caucus, and I'm interested in working with other legislators from around the state to really bring to the table the discussion about revitalizing our small communities and making sure that there's opportunities for people to work, but also work in a way that's going to point them on the career that they want to be on in the small communities. And then finally, working with the other Lamoille County legislators to do what I can do to support the communities dealing with the forced merger with Act 46. So those are a few of the issues I'm working on. I'm interested to hear your questions, and I do apologize, but I'm going to have to sneak out around 8:45 to help host the GOP at the Cambridge Elementary School. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, Julie and Rich, can you help? Can you get, this is open now to question and answer. It's outstanding, Julie, that everybody kept their talks brief. So we're going to have two microphones up here. Let's move this one down. So it's open for, please state your name, where you're from, and what your question is. And if it's directed at one person, please identify that person.
I'm Amy Olson, the Library Director of the Lanford Memorial Library in Hyde Park, and also President of the Vermont Library Association. What I have to say is less of a question and more of an awareness. Recently, I've been aware of an issue that is essentially a decision that the FCC will be making that changes the funding structure that might eliminate funding for our PEG access television, which is public, educational, and governmental TV. Green Mountain Public Access is here today filming this legislative breakfast and your information that you're sharing with Vermonters in the local community. And I think in Vermont, we really pride ourselves in having that really participatory, governmental, local citizens like myself can participate in local government because we're a small state, but also we're a rural state. So understanding that not all Vermonters can come out to a legislative breakfast or a select board meeting or from a public library issue to a library program. GMATV was at a program that we had on Saturday filming so that our outreach can go into people's safety and comfort of their living rooms. So, and in addition to that, in Vermont, PEG Access TV employs 200 Vermonters, and like public libraries and Vermont craft breweries, we have more public access television stations per capita than any other state. So we can see that this is a valuable organization in our communities. What can you do about it? I'm not really sure because this is a federal decision, but the Vermont Library Association has written a letter to the SEC urging them to reconsider this funding structure change, and I have some information for you so that if something does come to your radar, that at least you're aware that this is an issue and that it does affect our local communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Anybody have any comments?
I have a question.
All right.
Is this a proposed rule in front of FCC right now? Because they've got a few rule changes under their...
It is in front of them right now. It hasn't, the decision, as far as I know, hasn't been changed. And if anything good came out of the government shutdown, it's put some of these decisions on hold. So it's a little bit confusing to me. So that's why the handout that I have for you, and I have a few extras if anybody else is interested. And the Vermont Access Network person to talk to is Kevin Christopher. So if you have any questions about this or want more information, that's in the handout as well.
Just to be contact our congressional delegation too?
I'm not really sure. Yeah, I think that would be a smart thing to do, just so that we know that this is important, that they know that this is important to us on the local level.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to add that I knew this before I was on the committee, but serving on the committee that, among other things, deals with cable, the world of regulation or non-regulation of all of these companies is a pretty bewildering web, and state government has very, very little authority and control over cable other than the location of lines and poles and things like that.
And I completely understand that. This is just to raise awareness that this is an issue that affects our rural areas in Vermont and our local access to free and open information.
Rich?
Is the $8.1 million the grant? Or, because it says 8.1 in fees were collected by Vermont cable operators.
So I would actually refer you for further questions to Kevin Christopher from the Vermont Access Network, because I really don't have those details. I just am concerned about this going away, this funding going away.
Question number 2.
Hello, good morning. I'm Jessica Bickford. I'm the coordinator of Healthy Lamoille Valley, and we're a Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition preventing youth use throughout the Lamoille Valley. I know that there's some legislation being introduced this session on vaping, and I know that that's something that a lot of our youth have been talking about. Last year we took about 16 students down to DC, and they were able to talk to our national representatives. But it's also something that we continue to work with on a local level. We're being asked routinely to go into schools and do education for staff as well as for students. So just know that this is something that really is touching our service area. We have a vapor alert. We worked with, we have the Lamoille Area Youth Council, which has student representatives at Stowe, PA, and Lamoille that come together monthly. And they were sharing some of the actual devices. We hear a lot in the news about the juuling device, but there's a lot of other devices that are being seen in our schools. So we just have information packets with some of the YRBS material, but also on top of that, in your folders is a vapor alert, so just that you have some up-to-date and current information of how it's impacting our region. So thank you for your work.
If you'd like to hand them out, you want to hand them out? All right. Questions?
So we actually have taken up a bill to, in our committee, to not allow internet sales of vaping devices. And so we heard from the Commissioner of the Department of Health, and these products are this vaping, the electronic piece of it. You know, he showed one around that has cartoon characters on it, and the little vape that they put in there is creme brulee flavor or bubble gum flavor, and it's got nicotine in it. And the only reason they put nicotine in it is so that you get addicted to it. And so this Juul company that's selling these and manufacturing these, it's totally targeted at our children, and I know, this is one of the bills we're taking up right now is not allowing the sales on internet because that's how a lot of the kids will get them. They can just order them online and they'll be delivered to their house. So it will be, I know the governor has proposed in his budget address to tax these at the same rate that we tax tobacco products. Currently, they're only subject to sales tax. So they don't even know what's in this stuff. So I was asking the commissioner, do you know what's in these? And he's like, the only thing we know is nicotine. And so it's definitely turning out to be a real health issue for our youth. And maybe we don't need these. So we'll see where it goes.
All right, we're going to lose Rich Westman and Lucy Rogers pretty soon, so if there's anything urgent for either of them, I want to thank them very much for coming here, and we'll see you next month. Do you have a question?
More commentary and response. My name is Paul Shortino. I'm a resident of Jeffersonville for over 30 years. And when I thank you for what you do, I really respect what you do, and the time is a great forum. Mine is a grander idea in that I represent the fourth part of government, that's the citizens of Vermont. I don't think we have a strong enough voice, and what I'd like to ask is for a referendum in the state, and I'd like to see legislatures try and improve the government system. So I was taken aback, Tim Ash on Vermont Edition last Monday when that recommendation came up, he poo-pooed that and say, well, billionaires would come in and sway the position of whatever the issue is. How is that different than today? But to me, that's more of a comment that we're not smart enough citizens and that the legislatures are smarter than us. Look at Act 46. I'm in the town that voted it down. Morrisville voted it down, but we're not smart enough. So I ask that you propose and have a referendum. Let the citizens have a stronger voice. Another suggestion would be if I pay taxes, 25% of the taxes to Vermont, I get to decide which department it goes to. I want you to show me benefit of what your department does. And the last solution, you're going to be looking for revenue. How about we tax all political contributions? The legislature taxes everything else in the state, but not themselves. Thank you for listening.
Any comments?
I'll respond. I don't mind that last idea. I think that's a good one. Referendums, I worry about. I worry about first probably, although I disagree with him a lot. Probably a lot because of what Tim Ash said. I think you would find a lot of outside influence coming in, which is fine. I would argue that we have a 2-year cycle, election cycle, and if people are holding their legislators accountable for their votes on Act 46 and otherwise, then those legislators would be defeated. But if people are not holding their legislators accountable, then that's a challenge. And I would argue that, again, we have a 2-year cycle and we have accountability in Act 46, and I argued against it in 2015. We were giving 9 people, unelected, unaccountable people, the authority to essentially dissolve municipalities. Because school districts are municipalities, and they are not accountable, they are not elected. We should, at the very least, should have had the legislature approving the state plan that the board came up with. But we gave that authority away, and I've, again, fought against that, but it won, and if people were upset about that, then they should have held their legislators accountable. And I don't see that people are as upset about it as we think in certain districts.
Thanks, Heidi.
I just have a question about, not so much a question, but what your thoughts. You had mentioned Act 250. I think this is huge, especially being from Jeffersonville and working in the hospitality industry and also owning a snowmobile company that uses the Bass Trails. And I've heard a bunch of stuff as far as what's proposed for Act 250. What do you guys think about this? As far as, do you think it's too strict? Do you think it's on task? I mean, some of the stuff that's going around is like, are you kidding me? So just interested in your thoughts.
So far, I think we only have the report. There's no, I haven't seen a bill come out yet, so that's going to be the real decider about what's going on. I will say that I think we got to a point where growth has stagnated for years, and it's time to reevaluate. I'll agree with the governor on that. It's time to reevaluate where we do that 250. And I would like to see peeling back some of the issues, and of course we still have to maintain. We don't want Lake Champlain being dirty or something like that. We're still going to maintain clean water initiatives, but so far we haven't seen specifics yet, so I can't really comment on what that's going to be. But I will certainly be open and willing to try to make things less restrictive, so we can actually have a little bit of growth again, and be able to have people be able to invest in our communities to build up infrastructure. And
Well, like the tax on, 9% rooms and board, or rooms and meals tax, we have 9% rooms and meals. And then I saw that for the Clean Water Act, we have to add another 1% in the upcoming years. How, I guess, in being a rural community in Jeffersonville, how does that affect Lake Champlain? You know what I mean? And then to tax and I know 25% of the 9% tax goes to education and none to promoting hospitality, or very little. So and then the Act 250 and having like resorts fit into one box, paying more in, it's like what's happening?
Sure. So it's the tourism budget is a separate issue, which my committee approves and sent a recommendation upstairs to the base committee, and we've been very good about making sure tourism dollars get out there and go to the right places. As far as us in Lamoille County, we have a little river basin, we all contribute as far as road runoffs to the river system that eventually makes its way to Lake Champlain. And on the other side of that, years ago, Connecticut River was not in great shape. I think people had to step up and clean up the river there too. So, it's going to be it's not easy. We've got a lake that's not healthy. We have fresh water that's not healthy, and we've got to find the balance of we have to allow some growth because it's just not working the way it is right now. At least it doesn't seem to be working, in my opinion. And so we'll have to wait and see what the language says before I can actually make more comments.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Tom Gardner. Two-part Act 46 question. As the legislature is working toward this moratorium, at least Stowe and EMU are moving toward operating in two alternate realities in a way. They're operating the as it was reality of each of them crafting their own school board budgets and electing their own officials, but at the same time hoping that they don't have to do all this work for a merger come July 1st. If a moratorium does happen, or if the legal action does prevail, what happens to the parts that they have already in place? We already have this other lawsuit with 30-something plaintiffs on it. They have a 5-week stand. I don't even know what they're doing for preparation. What do say Stowe and EMU have to do if they, come February 26, have their articles of agreement in place? April, they have a board for a merged board adopted. Where do they stop? And if they do get a moratorium, will it go into effect July 1st of 2020 after the day, or they can do it all again next year?
So Tom, that's it's complicated. I will just first say that is precisely why the timeline is so short for us to actually do something. We have to get this out of the House and then over to the Senate and out of the Senate within the next couple of weeks in order for anything to be possible legislatively. And if it's put on hold, and we're we're not, so there are several bills out there, but we're really focused on, as a working group, is the extension, is the 1-year extension, which is the July 1, 2020. And that's where we're really focused. I testified on it last week, as did Penny Jones from Elmore, and a few other people. Kara Zimmerman and myself will be testifying tomorrow in House Ed. They're certainly giving us time. They're listening to us. Dave has been very involved, and I thank him with regard to the leadership of the House and conversations with them on his end. And we're just really trying to do it. So, but the bottom line is, we're not sure, the attorneys for the school districts are really giving them advice on how we might be able, so the articles of agreement are up for a vote in Stowe and Elmore, I think on February 26th. I'm not sure if they can, now that it's warned, if we were to be able to pass this by February 15th, if they are able to take that off, that warning away, or if we go through it and then we just pause after that and say, okay, we're going to just pause for a while and then go back to it after the legal case is done, or as the next semester gets over and the school boards start working toward it. Again, the reason for this extension is really twofold. It is to ensure that the legal case gets a fair hearing, and the AG's office, the Attorney General's office, has determined and asked the court to also work quickly on it. But even as that is going, we're going to have to, our boards are committed to doing it and doing it right and doing it well. So they're going to need some time to do it, and that's, so again, the lawyers are really giving advice to the school boards on the direction in which they can go as this is being processed. But we're in a territory we haven't been in before, and so we're just, that's why the time frame again is so short. We really need to get this done in the next couple of weeks.
So, we were at an organizational meeting to elect temporary officers for the merged district. There's really two tracks going on. There's really the track that's saying we're in court, we're going to fight this, and in the legislature we're trying to get the moratorium to allow for the year's extension. That's one track. But the district, I think, has to live within the law that's there. And the law says you're going to merge unless we can get that taken up. And that's why, and I know there was a lot of questions at the organizational meeting that they had for the district at the auditorium at Peoples. But the school boards face what the law is now, which says you're going to merge. And it's a very tight timetable for them to do that. And so they are going through every single step to make sure that if they lose the court case, don't get the extension through the legislature, that they will be in compliance with the law, which they have to do. And so it's really two tracks that are going on, and there were a number of people that asked questions in the crowd the other night. Why are we going through this if we're doing all of these other things, trying to get the extension and going to court? Why do we do that? The reason they have to do it is they have to follow the law, and frankly, for those people that said, well, we should ignore the law and then we wouldn't have any standing at all in court, and we would have less standing in the legislature if we acted as if we didn't want to live within the law. But living within the law and doing all of that, I think it helps our case to make the case that we don't think this is right and we think it's not right on these grounds.
Just let me add one thing. Don't forget that on the second track that Richie's talking about, the February 15th is the next court date. And there is the petition, the appeal, or the lawsuit requests, all of them, at least the big one and our, both request a moratorium or a delay on this, or a stay, I should say, actually, it's a stay. So that might be the other, but we need to work legislatively, they're working on a stay and what have you. So that's the other thing that's going on. And they had a status conference last week, as you may have seen in the papers and on the news. But the next one is February 15th, so, and hopefully that's also one of the options, they could get the stay through that.
Questions? All right.
I have a question pertaining to solid waste. It's really a natural resources committee type question, but for people who aren't following this too closely, Vermont does have a solid waste monopoly, essentially one remaining landfill open in Coventry, Vermont. It's run by a for-profit corporation, and it's creating increasingly powerful odors throughout downtown Newport, where we're really concerned about trying to encourage redevelopment and revitalization. But I think an even bigger problem than the odors is the leachate from the landfill seeping into Memphremagog, Lake Memphremagog, and really creating an international difficulty. There are all sorts of carcinogens, and we can act as though, well, out of sight, out of mind. A lot of parts of this state are nowhere near Newport, but at the same time, we're all going to be sharing in the, for one thing, the cost of caring for these people is astronomical, and the cost of human suffering is just unconscionable. We need to really be taking a look at a plan going forward. Currently, they're licensed for 3 more years. They want, I think, a 10-year extension on that. At that point, I mean, we're already dealing with a poorly run facility that's creating a really growing embarrassment. I think it's an emerging issue that really is going to be requiring some attention. I don't know who can respond to this.
I'm not a no expert. You probably know more about it than I do. I've only read the articles, from the media. But what I can do is the chair of my committee is Michael Marcotte, who's from Coventry. I'll ask him about it and try to get back to the chamber community, spread more information. So Mike Marcotte's also on the select board in Coventry too, so I'm sure he has a lot of information, and I'll try to get back with some more info.
I've actually been on that landfill probably 20 or 30 times. Washington Electric Co-op operates the landfill methane plant on that and provides about 2/3 of all of the energy that the co-op uses. And I actually, when the co-op was in 2003, 2004 in the regulatory process for getting approval of the generating plant, Casella was in Act 250 at the same time for an expansion at that time, so I actually sat in on some of their hearings in Newport. I do think, and I have to say I found it ironic that on the Canadian side of the border, some of the people who were protesting the loudest were operating unlined landfills very close to the lake. I'm not familiar with the current regulatory process, but I do believe that in terms of how that company operates that landfill, that they operate it pretty well, and that there is not leachate leaking into the lake, and that they take considerable precautions about that. With that said, a landfill is an unpleasant place, and it has odors, and it is, although trash from some parts of the state goes out of state to closer landfills in New York and I believe in New Hampshire, it is the only operating landfill in the state of Vermont, and so the fact is the state doesn't have a permitted landfill and doesn't look like it's about to anytime soon, other than that landfill. And that is a situation we're confronted with, which is where's it going to go? And like I said, in the previous expansion that I was very involved in. There was a group of landowners who were, as a group, parties to their proceedings. And at a certain point, their attorney asked for permission to withdraw all of them from the case. And I wondered, I was sitting in the hearing at the time wondering, well, what's that about? And what it was about, I discovered a few months later, was that Casella basically bought out all of the people immediately bordering on the landfill at a price that they couldn't refuse, which is just a cost of doing business for them, and would expect that they might do something like that again. And just to be clear, I'm not representing Casella. I just happen to know a lot about that landfill.
Thanks, Evan. We have 5 minutes left for a quick question.
Listen, if any of you want to take a bite at this, the governor's got to his capital for a day, tour around Wall County, this year actually. He stopped at the newspaper offices. At the end of the day, in a moment of candor, he told us that he kind of has a fairly dim view of citizen wars like the State Board of Education or the Green Mountain Care Board or even the Public Utilities Commission as far as them making decisions for Vermonters, and felt that these decisions ought to be made better at the agency level. And I was wondering if you want to comment on agree, disagree.
Just a quick response. Having worked in the executive branch for a fairly extended period, it would not be naive of me to say that sometimes when you're in the executive branch, the governor's office might have a very strong opinion on something. And you more than likely will want to be a champion of that opinion if you want to be there. And I guess my point is, by having these boards, if they're properly staffed, it does allow, in my opinion, more of a voice. It should, unless they're tone deaf, can happen. So I think they are part of the checks and balance. I can remember being on what was then called the Public Oversight Commission in late 90s, early 2000s, when a governor at that time had an extremely strong feeling about a permit for a hospital not too far from here. And the board didn't agree with it, based on the evidence, based on the data. And the commissioner was still there the next week, but without it, clearly, that would have gone in a way that I don't think the data would have supported. So I can see the pros and the cons. Checks and balances are important to me.
Tommy, I would just say, I think you would find that, at least in my experience, I'll echo a little bit, although I don't know if Dave said it exactly, but I think most governors would prefer not to have boards outside, the executive branch. That said, it is the legislature and the governor who passed these laws to create these, whether it's the Green Mountain Care Board or the State Board of Education. The idea of the State Board of Education was that it would keep politics out of education. How well is that one? The Green Mountain Care Board, it's all part of, in my view, there's a trend in both healthcare and education for, bigger is better, one size fits all, state approach to both of these, and that's my concern about the boards. But the legislature is taking this authority, so it's not anything unusual that they'll take advantage of or they'll take that authority. They have to, do what they're supposed to do. So I guess that's what I would say. If that's the case, I would recommend. I've had a few bills in the past to remove some of the authority from the state board, for example, and but it's not something that has been a priority for the legislature or the executive branch in my ears. And in fact, the executive branch was the one who proposed the Green Mountain Care Board, if I'm not mistaken, when Governor Shulman was there, so.
Okay, thank you all very much. I want to extend a big thank you to Heidi, Ever, Matt, Rich, Dan, Dave, and Lucy for coming. I think this was a tremendously productive meeting. I look forward to next month. Where's that?
Next month, Memorial County Mental Health on Monday, February 25th. And then again, the following night, will be at Northern Vermont University Johnson campus for the annual meeting.
And thanks to Rich Smith. Josh Smith. Apologize.